Hey, welcome back, friendship, small groups. You have made it. You are awesome. You are at small group. Great job. All right, today we've got another topic that we're in this series called Christian Basics, where we are looking at the basic principles of Christianity. Some of the things that every Christian should know about and every Christian should follow if you call yourself a Christian. And so today we got a new topic. We are covering communion today. Communion. Now, communion is awesome because it is specifically for Christianity. Some of these other basic principles of Christianity, they're great and they should do them, like the ones we've covered, prayer and Bible reading. But those are not specific to just Christianity alone. Because if you ask a Muslim or a Hindu or any other religion, right, they're going to say, well, yeah, I pray and yeah, I study my scripture. They're not talking about the same God we're praying to, and they're not talking about the same Bible we're studying, but they still have those basic things. But communion is different because communion is specifically only for Christianity. No other religion does communion because communion was instituted by Jesus himself, and it is central around Jesus. The whole basics of communion revolve around Jesus' death on the cross. So no other religion does communion. It's really only for Christianity, which makes it incredible. It makes it awesome. So we're going to talk about that today, looking at what communion is. And just a reminder, through all of these topics that we're going through, we're going to try to look at it through the lens of 3 questions. We're going to do, what is it? Why should I care about it? And how do I do it? Okay? So those are the questions that we're looking at. And so let's jump right into communion here, talking kind of about the highlights of it. And if you want to learn more and you want to go deeper into this, come on Wednesday night, and we're going to be talking about it. I'm going to be teaching this on Wednesday night. So come on Wednesday. But for now, the highlights. So what is communion? Let's look at the beginning here. What is it? Well, simply put, the easiest explanation I can think of is this. It's an act of worship for Christians to remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross. That's simply what it is. It's us remembering that moment when Jesus died on the cross for us. When he took all of our sin, we remember it and we celebrate it with communion. Okay, that's simply what it is. But now a little bit deeper into that of what is communion. Well, it's us taking the bread and the cup, the juice, whether it's wine or whether it's grape juice, whatever. It's us taking those elements and symbolically remembering what Jesus has done through those elements. That the bread represents his body that was broken, so we break the bread. And his blood was shed for us, and so we remember the juice being like the blood. They are not literal. It is not a literal thing where the elements become the body and the blood inside of us. That we're not literally taking Jesus. This is not cannibalism, okay? Communion is not cannibalism. We are just simply remembering the act of what Jesus has done through these things. And so let's look at where this kind of started from, where it came from. And if you go to Luke chapter 22, verse 19 and 20, Jesus is speaking here, and he says this, "And he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And likewise the cup after he had eaten, saying, 'This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood.'" Okay, so Jesus institutes it. He creates it. He is at a dinner, a Passover dinner, where they are literally taking elements and remembering something that happened long ago. And Jesus is taking the elements and saying, we're going to do something different. We're going to do something new. This is a new covenant. This is a new tradition that I want you to continue on. The bread that is broken, this is remembering what I'm going to do. And the blood, this is remembering the sacrifice I'm going to make for you. And so Jesus is just extending the Passover kind of. They took the Passover to remember what has happened before. We take the Lord's Supper, we take communion to remember what Jesus has done for us. So it's not anything literal. It's just a symbolic gesture that we remember what he has done. So that's what it is. Then we go on to, why should I care about this? Okay, so if I know what it is, why should I commit to doing communion? Why does this matter to me as a Christian? Why should I do this? Well, we can go to several different places, and we're going to look at that on Wednesday, but let's go to Acts chapter 2, verse 42. This is the Christian church. This is after it was all established and built. And here's what the early Christians were doing. In Acts chapter 2, verse 42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayers. The early church made this a priority. And so we, as Christians, we should make this a priority. They devoted themselves to this. This was an important thing. This was a very important message and very important part of Christianity, to remember Jesus, to remember what he has done. Every time we can get together, we should remember what Jesus has done and take communion. And so that's a simple verse to help us understand why. Now, we're going to go into a lot more detail why we should do this later on Wednesday. So come then, we're going to get into that. But for now, we know what it is, we know why we should do it, and now how do I do this? Okay, how do I do this? Now, there are a lot of different styles of communion. You can take communion in a lot of different ways. I've been to some weird places where they do it strange. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's strange to me, but it's because I'm not used to that. You can take the little square chiclet. You can take the circle of the communion. You can take wafers. You can take actual loaves of bread that you break apart. You can take the flat bread. You can take wine. You can do grape juice. You can take the bread and you can dip it into the grape juice. You can even, I went to one church one time where they had us all come up front. They didn't pass it around the aisles. They had us all come up front. And then the guy prayed over the communion, and then he shoved it into the juice and then shoved it into my mouth. And I had to just stand there. I was like, this is so strange. This is so hard for me to concentrate on Jesus when you're shoving food in my mouth. But it was so strange. And so all of these different ways that you can do communion, these are all just styles of communion. And styles are not important. It does not matter how you do it. What is important of how you take communion is a matter of your heart. Okay, and so out of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, it says this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24. And when he had given thanks, he broke the bread, and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it, remembrance of me." Verse 26, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Why should I do this? Because it's proclaiming his death until he comes back. Verse 27, "Whoever therefore eats the bread and drinks the cup of the Lord," you take communion, "if you do that in an unworthy manner, you will be guilty of concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself." That's a scary verse. I mean, it really is. It's kind of a scary verse that if you are taking communion without thinking about it, without discerning and the understanding, without examining your heart and understanding where you are with Jesus, then you might be guilty of the body and the blood. And so it's really, really kind of a scary verse almost, but it's a verse to remind us that we need to examine our hearts. We need to understand why we are taking communion. Do I have sin in my life that I need to ask forgiveness for? Is there some relationship that I need to mend? I need to fix? I need to come together before I'd really kind of take communion. What kind of things am I dealing with that I need to let God have control of? Examine your heart. Why are you taking communion? Are you remembering Jesus, or are you just simply hungry? And when the bread comes by, you're like, "Oh man, that was some good bread. Hey, can I have some more bread?" Or when the cup comes by, you're like, "Man, I am so thirsty. I'm going to take my communion. I'm going to take that communion. I'm going to take that guy's communion because, hey, can I have seconds? Can I have some more, please? I'm super thirsty." Right? That's an unworthy manner of taking communion. You're not considering Jesus. You're not thinking about his sacrifice. So that's what this verse is talking about. How we take communion doesn't matter the style. It's a matter of your heart. Are you thinking about Jesus and considering what he has done for you? That's what we should do with communion. So here's a question for you for small group, okay? For your group time, to get you guys going and get you started, here's a question I want you to talk about. What is the strangest style of communion that you have been a part of or have seen? There's a lot of weird ones out there. Some people don't like standing up. Some people don't like having it passed around. Some people don't like it dipped in. Like there's a lot of different ways that people take communion. What is one of the strangest ways that you have been a part of or have seen with communion? I shared you with my story of them shoving food in my mouth. That was super strange and super awkward. So talk about that amongst your groups. And then on Wednesday, come to youth group. We're gonna dive a little deeper into this and look at communion a little more. And so, hope you guys have a great group time, and I will see you real soon on Wednesday. See ya.